give a little introduction?
All right. Hi there, Hari Om, Hari Bol, welcome. It's an honour for Ashram Yoga to be able to help provide space for Prem to come and talk. We've known each other for quite some time now, and I've always thoroughly enjoyed his talks. Although I might come from the Shiva side, he comes from the Krishna side. In the end, it's all the same, and it's just a really wonderful experience to hear Prem's talks about yoga. Some of the clearest speeches I've ever heard anywhere, and it's always quite remarkable to spend a bit of time in his presence, chant the Maha Mantra, and take it from there. You know, it's really quite a wonderful experience. Maha Mantra is very cool anyway. You don't have to be anybody or anything to chant it, and it's chanted all over India. In actual fact, last time I was in India, or the second last time, I was in Rishikesh, and I'm walking back from dinner with a couple of my friends, and one of them said, "I can hear kirtan drumming." She was a mad kirtan freak. And I said, no. Anyway, we found it. It was in this really old house. It was all, looked like it was locked up, but it wasn't. We went to the gate and it had a chain. We played with it and it fell apart, so we went in. Will we go in? Yes, we'll go in. So we go in and we hear this drumming, you know. And we get to the front door and it had a chain on it. And it looked like it was all locked, and it all fell apart. So, will we go in? Yes, we'll go in. So we went in. And then there was this long corridor, and right down the end of it, there was about a dozen or so people chanting Maha Mantra. And so we went down there, and at the time, there was two sadhus, basically off the street, and they were playing harmonium and drum, but the rest of the guys obviously came from that place. And it was the first evening of these people attempting to chant Maha Mantra continuously forever. 24/7. It was the first evening, and so there we were. But you know, interestingly enough, just that afternoon we'd been to the Shivananda ashram, which is my lineage, and they have for 70 years been chanting Maha Mantra in a little room down the back of the ashram. 70 years, non-stop. So you know, it's a very important mantra. It holds the world together a little. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Namashishtam manamapi pashachi putam atasarupam Rupam tasagrajamuripuim maturim gostvaktim Radha kundamagivaram Bahoradika madhvasam Rapto Patita Kripaya Sri Guru Natosmi Purave Gaurachandaya Radhikaya Sarani Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya First of all, I take my heart like a palm full of flower petals, and with great honor I offer the flower petals of my heart at the feet of my holy master, my spiritual guru, named
Vishnu Om Vishnupad Ashtotara Satsishimad Rupanugacharivaya Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Secondly, I bow down thousands and thousands of times at the feet of my Guru's Guru, and to his Guru, and his Guru, and his Guru, and his Guru, in our lineage going back thousands of years, till the Vedic time, when Bhagavad Gita was spoken, 5,000 years ago and before then. Why? Because the potent ingredient in our advancement in spiritual conscissness is the respect and the honor we give to those who have entered into the mysteries that have been yet to be revealed to us. And as we respect and give honor to the enlightened persons and the great teachers of the past, the degree to which our respect is going up, to the same degree, and often more, their grace is coming down. Because the divine transcendental subject, it is beyond the capacity of our physical senses, beyond the capacity of our material mind and intellect to grasp. So some grace is necessary, along with our efforts. We'll have to do sadhana, practice. But on top of that, some mercy is necessary. So first I'm remembering my teacher and his teacher, all the teachers in the tradition. And then, thirdly, I am bowing down to all of you, very wonderful people who have very kindly come here today to grace me with your presence and give me a chance to serve you. So my pranam to you all. So, I discovered about the topic of this seminar today. Can yoga inform neurology? I discovered about the title of this seminar yesterday evening when I arrived. I think about 4 or 5 months ago. We sent some lecture titles here, and they just picked them out of a hat and selected this one, so we ended up with this one today. So that's why you've all come, to hear about this subject. So we'll start there. Before speaking about how the Vedic philosophy of yoga can inform neurology, I want to say a few words about how neurology confirms the basic tenets of the yoga philosophy. Perhaps you know that yoga is based on a system of categorization of the different elements of the world, which is called Sankhya. Sankhya. San means completely, and Kya means to describe or to count. So Sankhya means to perfectly describe or to precisely count what are the ingredients, the components of this reality in which we find ourselves. So, according to the Sankhya philosophy, which is the foundation of yoga practice, we have a physical body, and it is composed of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Bhumi, apu, analo, vayu, kam, mano, buddhi, evacha. Ahankara, ityame, bina prakriti astata. Do we have any Sanskritists here today? No. So also in Bhagavad Gita this is described very beautifully. Now, someone may object, what kind of primitive system of the analysis of the elements is this? Earth, water, fire, air and space. We have the periodic table, beginning with the hydrogen and helium and all the elements, all nicely arranged according to electron valency and so on. So our periodic table of the elements is more accurate than the Vedic idea or the yogic understanding. No, it's a different way of looking at the world. Don't think that it's primitive. Earth, water, fire, air, space. No. Rather, it's a consciousness-based analysis of reality. It begins with consciousness and then goes out. Instead of starting with the physical elements and never being quite able to figure out what consciousness is. You know, that's a modern science. Have you no clue, actually, what is consciousness? So, this analysis of the elements is phenomenological. Phenomenology means when the world is described in terms of how we perceive it. And therefore, space means the element in which we can detect sound. You know, if you close your eyes and you hear a sound, you know where it came from in space. So space is the element which is detected through our sense of hearing. And then the next element, air, contains sound but also movement. And that movement is detected by the sense of touch. Then the next element is more gross, that is the fire. So fire has sound, it has, you can feel it, it has movement, but it also has form that you can see. So there's light emanating. So space, air, fire, then water. Water contains sound, contains touch, contains form, and water carries the element of taste. And the last one, earth, contains all of the 5 sense objects, including fragrance. So it's an analysis of the elements according to the way that we perceive them, phenomenology. So that is the physical body, the gross body, earth, water, fire, air, and space. And then, within this, we have the Shukshma Sharir, Linga Sharir, the subtle body. The subtle body, in a general way, in yoga, it's called Chitta. And it's correct. In Vedanta, the categories, the elements within Chitta also analyzed. They are first Manas. Manas means mind. Then, so the mind is the element which is accepting and rejecting all the time. As we wander through life, we see things that I like that, I don't like that. I like him, I don't like him. The mind is always telling us, accepting and rejecting things. Then, superior to the manas, or the element of mind. Mind is an element, it's a substance, it's a fabric. It's like the fabric your cloth is made of, but it's very fine, finer than space. It's much finer than space. That's why, even though your head is only this big, it never gets full of thoughts. You have so many thoughts, but the head never gets full, because the element of mind is finer than space itself. I suppose it's a bit like Doctor Who's TARDIS, you know. On the outside you go in, but it's defies space. So mind, superior to that is buddhi. The element of buddhi is even finer than the mind. That is the element of discrimination, buddhi. And higher than buddhi is ahankar, ego. And then the last covering of the soul is called mahat, or chitta, which is very, very fine, the finest element, and it is the nearest neighbor to the soul. Now, how these elements come about? Mahat or chitta, the finest element, is sattvic. Sattvic. But when it's touched by rajas and touched by tamas, then from that one element, Mahat, all the other elements come. Just like if you have milk and you just touch it with a little lemon juice, then what happens? Curdles and becomes yogurt. Then you can, have you seen in India, they put the yogurt, the churning stick in the yogurt, and they have ropes and they pull like this. It's very hard work, and after some time you keep churning and this yogurt turns into butter. And if you then take that butter and then heat it, what happens? It turns into ghee. Like that. So you have one element here, you have one substance, milk. But this milk, the same milk, goes through transformations. Milk, yogurt, butter, ghee. And even though it's the same substance transforming, each one of its transformations has completely different qualities. Completely different qualities. Even contrary qualities that are contrary to each other. So, in the same way, the Mahat, the very subtle and finest sattvic essence of material energy, by the touch of Rajas, begins to evolve through all the elements and becomes ahankar, ego, buddhi, intelligence, mind, and then space and all the other down to earth like this. So this is how the world evolves. Now we want to look at the different elements and see which aspect of the gunas are present there. I think, is everyone, you're all yoga people, so you're all familiar with the gunas, yeah? Sattva, just in brief, Sattva is the energy of balance, by which everything is sustained, by which its existence continues. And from Sattva comes Gyan Shakti, awareness. So then you have Rajas. Rajas means passion. And this contains Kriya Shakti, it's the energy of activity. Now this Rajas has one particular quality, and that is that it's creative, it's explosive, it's dynamic, and it's also unstable. Like all creative, dynamic people are. It's unstable. Rajas, or passion, cannot be sustained. Sattva, peacefulness, can be sustained. But the Rajas is unstable. It goes like a shooting star, everyone says, wow, and then it burns out and crashes. So that means that the Rajas, because it's unstable, always turns into the next guna, which is tamas, inertia, darkness, destruction. So these three aspects of Prakriti, or material nature, the three gunas, they are responsible. Rajas for the appearance or the creation of all things, Sattva for their maintenance, and then Tamas for their destruction. So since everything in the visible world is a product of these three gunas, these three energies in the material nature, so everything comes into being, stays for some time, and then disintegrates and disappears. So this physical plane is the plane of the play or the interaction of the gunas. So the chitta or mahat, the most subtle energy or covering of the soul, is predominantly sattvic, and in that sattva there is Gyan Shakti, awareness. Then when it is touched by Rajas, what is that touch? How does that touch of Rajas come about? It is said that Prakriti, the sum total of material energy, is feminine. So Prakriti begins to create by union with the Purush, which is our good friend Shiva. So when Lord Shiva unites in the sexual union with Prakriti, with Durga, who is the Mother Nature material energy, then the material energy becomes agitated by the union with Shiva, the Purush. Prakriti, Kal, Purush. That is time. Shiva means time, personified, touching the material energy and bringing about the Kriya Shakti, the power of action. So when the Kriya Shakti is infused into the Mahat, then that is the universal prana. There's a prana in your body that you can feel, and indeed I believe we're at a festival called Prana also. So what is prana? What is that? Everyone talks about it. Everyone has a wristband saying prana. But what is this prana that we're all talking about? Prana. Sanskrit is a very interesting language. It's your language. Don't think it's foreign. Okay? You're not learning anything foreign today. This is your homegrown the inheritance. You are inheriting this because you are the children of this world. Sanskrit is the mother language of all languages. You know, the English word for a female child is a daughter. And in Sanskrit it is Duhitra. A son. In English, male child is a son, and in Sanskrit, Sunu. A man, Manu. Most of our vocabulary in English is coming through Latin and Greek and goes back to Sanskrit. So prana is made of two words. Sanskrit is interesting because the words combine together to make other words. So here prana is made of two words that you know. First of all, the prefix pra, this prefix. So in English, this Sanskrit prefix over millions of years has become pra has become pro. So pro in English means the forward or before, like progress, pro-life. Anything which is before or which is moving something forward, it has the prefix pro in English. So here, that has come from the Latin, the Sanskrit pra. And ana gives us the Greek and Latin word animus. Animus means life. So that by which we are animated. We have this word in English, animated. That which is life, has life is animated. So progress, and ana, animated. That which moves forward the life is called prana. This is your language. You have to own it. Just like in English, what do you call a person? I'm going to remember the Oxford English definition here. Impelling attractiveness that inspires devotion. Impelling attractiveness that inspires devotion. This is the definition of what English word in the Oxford Dictionary. Brilliant, yes. Our friend, what is your name, sir?
Jeffrey or Janak.
Janak. Immediately in 1 second he said, charisma. Charisma. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Charisma. The word charisma comes from the Greek, charis. Charis means power and grace. Both. And who has power and grace, that is called charisma, has impelling attractiveness that inspires devotion. So guess what the Sanskrit word Krishna means? It means impelling attractiveness that inspires devotion. Krish in Sanskrit means attractiveness. And na means ananda, joy, which is the essence of bhakti or the essence of devotion. So you can see how many of our English words, they're based on Sanskrit. So this is our language. So we're discussing Pran, where Pran comes from. So first we're touching in the primordial creation of the universe, before the world is manifested, because the whole universe is manifested for some time, for billions of years, and then it's withdrawn again, and then again manifest in cycles. like this. So now, because the scientists have the Big Bang theory, that there was the dreaded singularity. There was a singularity of points and it expanded and became the universe. It will contract and become one again. And they're pretty much close to the fact. The Vedas of India say the same thing. That by the union of Shiva, Kalpurush, time, with the female Prakriti Durga, that is the original Big Bang, then the Prakriti, the unmanifest mature energy, begins to manifest. First the Sattvic Mahat, and then the Rajasic Kriya Shakti appears, and that is the Pran, the power that moves the whole universe, that keeps the planets in motion, and is manifesting everything. So at the moment we're discussing how the elements relate to the universe. But all these elements are present within our own body too. Because our body is a microcosm of the whole universe. And if, by very careful concentration and introspection, you can analyze the elements and the workings, the gross and the subtle workings of your form, you will know all the principles of the entire universe. By understanding the microcosm, you will know very clearly all aspects of the macrocosm. So, the Rajasic Mahat is the prana of the universe. But Rajas is not stable and it becomes tamasic. The tamasic Mahat or tamasic Chitta is called Ahankar or ego. Ego. Then this ego, within this ego, there's an aspect, it's basically tamasic, it's a darkness, it's an inertia. Ego is a darkness within our consciousness. People today speak about the subconscious. The subconscious. What is the subconscious? The subconscious is the part of your consciousness so dark you cannot see what's going on there. An enlightened person doesn't have a subconscious because it's so light inside they can see everything that's going on. But until one becomes enlightened, there's a dark area of our consciousness that we cannot see what's there. And that is Ahankar, the ego. This ego is a condensed mass of impressions. They're called in Sanskrit sanskars. Sanskars means impressions. Impressions in our chitta. Every time you have an experience, it leaves an impression. So these impressions, they accumulate, not only in this life, but for thousands of lifetimes you have. So the dense mass of sanskars, that dark area of the chitta, that is called ahankar. And from that ahankar emanate the vasanas, desires. Because the experiences we've had in the past, which seem to be pleasurable, pleasing to us, they are stored in the subconscious, in the chitta, in the ahankar. And when we come into a situation that stimulates in a particular way, then from the ahankar, then the impressions manifest into the conscious mind. So when the previous impressions of previous life, which we are not aware of, manifest into our conscious mind, we call that, I just had an idea. What should we do today? I don't know. Oh, I've got an idea. Like this. You ask yourself, where do your ideas come from? When you have a desire, you want something, where does that desire come from? Where does it come from? Patanjali speaks about rag. He said that which has been experienced before. When you feel the anticipation to experience what has already been experienced, that's called rag, attachment. So, from the subconscious ahankar, ego, which is full of the impressions of many lifetimes, emanate desires into the conscious mind. And we think, well, this is, we feel, I'm free, I have my independence. But rather no, we are being guided, our actions, activities are being dictated by the activities we have done before. So when our present activities are being dictated by is called being in the grip of karma. Karma means the choices we're making now are being dictated by past activities. Even though we feel as if we are making the choices right now in real time, but no one knows what's going to happen next. Except for any half-decent astrologer. He knew like 10 years ago when you were going to decide tomorrow. Right? So how can that be? How is it that the stars in the sky, they're in different positions like that? And from looking at them, we can find out what George will think next week. How is that? How are these things all connected? Yet we feel that we're free. We feel that we're making the choices in real time. But we're not. We only feel that we're making those choices in real time because of ego. In Sanskrit, ego is ahankara. Ahankara. Aham means I am. Aham means I am. It's quite close to the English, isn't it? Aham, I am. Kara. Kara comes from the verb kri. Kri. Kri means create. In Latin, creo. So you see Sanskrit, English, Latin, it's the same. Ahankara. I am creating my destiny. But actually not. This is called Maya illusion. So this ahankar, the aspect of the ahankar, which is it's tamasic, but which is a little bit more sattvic than the rest. From this transformation comes the element of mind. So the conscious mind that we have itself is a transformation of ego. So all the thoughts we have are generally related to our bodily identification. We think, how can I enjoy? How can I be comfortable? How can I satisfy my various desires and hankerings and so on? So the mind works in this way, but it's all under the shadow of ignorance. This is why yoga is so essential, so important. Because just as a bull may be very powerful, but with a ring through his nose, he's easily taken anywhere. So in the same way, we may have so many skills or powers or energy, but actually, like a bull with a ring through the nose, we're being just dragged through the tunnel of our karma that we've created by previous activities. And only by yoga can one become free from those karmic reactions completely. By the yoga sadhana, by practice, we learn to watch the mind and be somewhat wary of it. Krishna described to Uddhav, his very close friend, in the Bhagavad Purana, one should train the mind in the way that one trains a wild horse. You know, when someone has a wild horse, they have a corral. So the horse can't run everywhere, but he walks around in the corral. And they don't try to immediately jump onto the back of the wild horse. Why? Because the horse will just go berserk and throw them off. So you can't control your mind by... It will just go wild and you'll end up doing all the things that you promised not to do. A lot of laughter in the audience there. Some experience. So, Krishna said no. An expert horse trainer is watching the horse go around like this. And he sees his temperament. And at a particular time, then he comes and then just gives a little discipline to make the horse do a little something and then gives him some space again. And gradually brings the horse under control. So in the same way, one has to be objective about one's own mind. Generally, our mind is the subject and the world is the object. But for the yogi, the soul, the Atma is the subject and the mind is the object. Because his identity isn't merged with the material energy, the element of mind, which is the transformation of ego. So, carefully watch your mind. In Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2, Sri Krishna said, Apuryamanam machala pratistam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sasanti maknoti nakamakami. Many rivers are flowing, and they flow into the ocean, but because the ocean is deep and vast, the ocean does not change its nature, does not transform or go somewhere else. So in the same way, the person into whose mind many desires flow, the vasanas emanating from the ego flow into the conscious mind, but because he is deep, he does not overflow. That means when the desires come, he is not moved to action. That person alone can attain peace, and not the person who says everything that comes into his mind, does everything the mind dictates to him to do. So we have to be very conscious and alert. Not fall asleep at the wheel. Fall asleep at the wheel means that the mind becomes, we identify this, that this is the subject. I am the mind, and the world is the object. No. I am Atma, the transcendental, eternal, spiritual being, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, of the Supreme Consciousness. As millions of photons emanate from the sun, every Atma emanates from the Supreme Consciousness. I am that. And so are all the people around me. And my mind, this is the object. Watching it very carefully. And not following the dictation of the mind, but we follow the dictation, the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Guru means one spiritual teacher. Sadhu means who is not your teacher, but anyway they are an enlightened person, so we take help and advice from them. And Shastra means the Vedas. The Vedas of India. We began our program today in chanting the Swasti Vachanam of the Rig Veda. Om Swasti No Govinda. So the Vedas, they are compiled by Vyas and his disciples. They are called Rishis. Rishi means one who sees. One who sees. So generally, when there's a religious discussion, then there's a discussion about faith. But faith is for blind people. Faith is for blind people. Two blind people are having a discussion. One says, I don't believe in the sun. The other says, no, there is such a thing as the sun. I don't believe you. Why do you have faith in the sun? Blind people can have faith in things that they don't know. But rishis don't have faith because they can see. For those who can see, there's no question of faith. So Rig Veda tells, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pasyanti Suraya Deviva Chakshuratatam. Just as an ordinary person with the naked eye looks at the sun in the sky, in the same way, those who are rishis, who are devoted, Suraya means the devotees, those who have pure transcendental devotion, they see with their pure consciousness the transcendental abode of Vishnu, the world of Vishnu. This is really why we have invited you all here today, to become astronauts, to go to another planet. You are here on Earth, and it's not bad, sometimes. But there's a great deal of suffering and problems here in this world. This is not the home of the soul. The home of the soul is Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, the transcendental world. And so there is a process. Yoga means the process to unite with the Supreme Consciousness and transfer Atma from the endless cycle of reincarnation in the physical world to the Parampadam, the transcendental eternal realm, which is the home of the soul. This is what yoga is about. Yoga is about becoming an astronaut. To go beyond this planet to the divine transcendental planets. So, we are discussing how not to follow the dictates of the mind, but to follow the dictates of the spiritual teacher, of the sadhus, the transcendentalists, and Shastra, the Vedas, which is advice, scientific explanation of all things by the rishis, those who, though being physically situated in this world, they can see by their trance, by their samadhi, they can see the divine realm. They can realize their own eternal spiritual body in which they're interacting in loving exchanges with the Supreme Being in the divine realm. They're called the rishis. So, you can also do this. We were discussing yesterday, I was discussing with Shanti Murti yesterday, about Abhinivesh. You know, in yoga there are 5 kleshas. So the last one is Abhinivesh. Abhinivesh means the fear of death. The fear of death, or the will to live within the physical plane. In the commentary on Vedanta Sutra, Vyas, the disciple of Patanjali, he says that even a small worm, little worm, does not want to die. If you try to trap him or in any way, he'll wriggle out. He wants to live. Why does he want to live? Because he's died before, and he has a sanskar inside that it was terrible. So no one wants to die. Because in our subconscious we have the sanskars, the impressions of dying many times. It was really painful. It was excruciating. Not only physically and sensually, but also emotionally as well. And this is why we want to live. And so Vyas, in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he mentions that the reason we want to live so intensely is the evidence of dying before, of previous lives. We can infer it from our will to live, Abhinivesh. Of course, if one practices a meditation in a proper way, that one is truly making progress, then the chitta becomes illuminated, and you can look inside your own chitta and see the sanskars from your previous lives. And from that you can understand all your previous lives, and where you would be going in the future lives, if you were not going off the track of karma towards the spiritual realm. And as the chitta becomes more enlightened and more pure, then you also get the ability to look at another person and see their sanskars also. The impressions of the experiences they had in previous lives, which have led them to today, right now. That ability will come. So, neurology. In Bhagavad Gita, 3 types of happiness are being described. 3 types of happiness. One is the sattvic happiness, the rajasic happiness, and the tamasic happiness. So it said that the tamasic happiness is just people who are in tamagun, they're kind of lazy. They wake up late in the morning, and the first thing they do is they drink something or eat something before washing, before taking a bath, putting on fresh clothes. Kind of lazy, sit around, watch a lot of TV, eat meat. Usually they're addicted to whatever, chocolate, coffee, cigarettes. Okay, so this is tamas. This is the element of tamas. They tend to become angry as well. Anger is a product of tamas. Tend to become angry, and if sometimes violent as well. This is all tamasic energy. So those persons, their enjoyment is just trying to get comfortable. If they can just be comfortable, then for them, that's just heaven. I'm sure many of you have been to India. So along the streets in India, there are open sewers. So, and there are wild pigs everywhere as well. So if a wild pig finds, on a hot day, a nice warm open sewer and he just drops into it. I'm in heaven. This is tamas, happiness in the mode of ignorance. So, human beings can also be like that. Just get drunk and sit on the couch in front of the TV for hours. It's a tamas. So, then there's happiness in rajas, in the mode of passion. This happiness comes from the intense sensory experiences. Like rajasic food is very spicy. Very spicy food it's rajasic. So generally people like the very spicy food. They have a cold drink with some ice in it here. So then you get the spicy food, wow, and you get a hit, and then you give it some cold ice, and then get some more spice like this. A very intense sensory experience. Of course, the most intense rajasic experience is sex for the general people. So, and this rajas gives a very big disturbance in the chitta. Sense gratification causes fluctuations in the mind, because yoga is about stopping the fluctuations in the mind. So, before asanas and pranayam, you have yam and niyam. And among the yams there is brahmacharya, to practice celibacy. So to practice celibacy is very important, because the sexual activity makes big waves in the mind, and then it's impossible actually to meditate. There's no question of anyone approaching ekagrata, one-pointedness, what to speak of samadhi, the stage of trance. So this is enjoyment in Rajagun, and this rajasic enjoyment, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita said, it's like nectar in the beginning and like poison in the end. If someone gives you poison, but sugar coated, then it tastes real good, and then afterwards, oh, what have I done? So all happiness which comes from the intense sensory experience, sense gratification, starts off being a hit. It's a buzz. It's really exciting. But then afterwards, there's a downer. Always. Always. And it becomes, it actually gradually destroys the body and mind. Actually, the body and mind both become gradually destroyed by the rajasic happiness. Whereas the sattvic happiness is the exact opposite. Just as rajasic happiness is nectar in the beginning and poison in the end, the sattvic happiness is poison in the beginning and nectar in the end. For example, if you're doing a sadhana, if you're doing a spiritual sadhana, it's important to wake up in the Brahma Muhurta. The Brahma Muhurta is an astrologically auspicious time, which is 1 hour 36 minutes before sunrise until 48 minutes before sunrise. This is the Brahma Muhurta. Because the different times of the day, they're also in different gunas. Like the middle of the day is very rajasic. Everyone's running around doing this and that in the middle of the day in their work. And then when it comes to the late night, then tamagun takes over, the tamasic energy takes over. But the early morning time is sattvic. And therefore, early to bed, early to rise. Yes, makes you wise. Makes you healthy, wealthy, and wise. Wise as well. Because wisdom comes from sattva. So the early morning time is sattvic. But the Brahma Muhurta, in the Brahma Muhurta, this period, 1 hour 36 minutes before sunrise to 48 minutes before sunrise, at that time the three gunas are in equilibrium. So all transcendentalists, they say you must wake up before the Brahma Muhurta and begin your meditations at that time. Because then you get the support of the whole universe. The support, nature is supporting you. If you wake up at 10:30 and then start your meditation at 12 o'clock, forget it. So, we're discussing happiness in Sattva Guna, in the mode of goodness. It's like poison in the beginning, but it's nectar in the end. That means that, oh God, I have to wake up at 4 in the morning? I can't do that. And then you do it, and it's okay, not bad. But then after a few days it's difficult and you don't want to do it anymore. But you have to try, you have to do it. Make yourself do it. Have discipline. You know, those on the spiritual path, they're not students exactly. Because a student studies, and when the study is over, he just goes to a party or something. On the spiritual path, one is a disciple. Not a student, a disciple. Disciple means who's under discipline. It's the same in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, the word for disciple is shishya. Shishya comes from sas dhatu, discipline. So, in order to progress in spiritual life, we have to have a sadhana, and that sadhana requires discipline, and that discipline requires effort. It's difficult. But what will happen? The happiness which is sattvic is like poison in the beginning, but it's nectar in the end. It starts off difficult, but if you stick at it with determination, you're very persistent, you'll see that after some time your sadhana becomes easy. Not only easy, but it becomes enjoyable. Not only enjoyable, but it becomes so much nectar that you cannot even contain it. Your heart cannot even contain the ecstasy which is coming from it. You need a bigger heart to hold it all. Supreme Lord will also give you a bigger heart, to be able to contain the amrita, the nectar, the ecstasy of transcendental realization and spiritual love. So, we are discussing 3 types of happiness in tamas, rajas and sattva. Now, the neurologists have confirmed this theory of happiness that is described in Bhagavad Gita. It's been confirmed. When the brain is scanned and brain activity is measured, it's seen that whenever you experience happiness, it's due to the electrochemical activity in a channel in your brain, which is called the reward system. The reward system. So this reward system goes from the back to the front of the brain, and when the electric charge is traveling through the reward system, then at that time people register that they feel happy. When they feel happy, then there's some movement of electricity through the reward system. Now, how does the electric charge travel through the reward system? It's carried by through the neural networks, but the neural networks have gaps in them. The neural networks have gaps. They're called synapses. Right? So there's a synapse, there's a gap. And in order to carry the charge across the synapse in the neural network, some chemicals are needed, and they're called neurotransmitters. So the neurotransmitters carry the electrical charge across the synapse of the neuron in the brain, and in this way the current moves in the reward system. Now, neurology has come to the point where they can see exactly how this is working. And what they've found is that if a person tries to enjoy some very intense type of stimulation, whatever it is they do, taking some drugs or sex or pornography or whatever people do to try to, I don't know, bungee jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever gives people a rush. All of these things, when that happens, then many neurotransmitters are released from one side of the synaptic cleft, and then they're caught by receivers on the other side. But what happens is, when a person is very stimulated by such activity, then the receptors on the other side, they withdraw into the cell. They just disappear. They just withdraw themselves into the cell. It's like a balancing mechanism. If a person is overstimulated, to slow everything down, then the receptors withdraw within the cell. Now what happens is, once the receptors are withdrawn within the cell, then when that experience is over, now that person has less possibility to experience happiness, because they don't have as many receptors to receive the neurotransmitters which are moving in the reward system. So I'll just state that again one more time. When a person tries to enjoy the physical pleasures, then the flood of neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft causes the receptors in the reward system to shut down. So the result is, the more you try to enjoy materially or physically, the less your ability to feel happiness. You see? Because actually everyone has a base level of happiness. There's always some neurotransmitters, some dopamine or whatever it is, flowing through there all the time, and that makes you feel good, makes you feel okay. So some people are generally very happy, yeah, and others are maybe not so happy most of the time, and others are more like that. So you can see by the faces of the person, if you examine the reward system, it's connected to how the flow of neurotransmitters is going on there. So people have a base level of happiness, which is their normal state. And what happens is, according to the experiences of life, that happiness may go up and down, but it always levels out to their base level of happiness. You know? And so it's been shown when, let's say, a person wins the lottery. So there's just a regular person with an ordinary life, and then they win $60 million. And then you think, well, now he'll be happy for his whole life. No, but what happens is, when they win the lottery, for the first few days, the flow of neurotransmitters in the reward system goes up. It peaks for a few days, but then it always just comes back down to the base level again. And the person has exactly the same level of happiness as they had before they won the lottery. Or same level of misery as well, whatever. Because there's a base level. And you can't change that. Some people are just genetically predisposed to being in a pissy mood all the time. That's the way they are. Their brain is like that. However, you can't change it by winning money or getting famous or anything. It won't change anything. It won't change a thing. Don't try for those things. They're not important. But the research has shown, for about 30 years, neurological tests were done on a group of Buddhists in Nepal. And it was shown that over many years of practice, the base level of happiness was slowly going up. It was slowly rising and staying there. And just as the years went by, it was going up. Why? Because the lifestyle is a sattvic lifestyle. So here we see that neurology is proving very conclusively the theories of yoga, the theories of Bhagavad Gita. It's not a matter of opinion anymore. No, it was a matter of opinion before. So, where are you going for New Year's Day? I'm going to the Prana Festival. Oh, really? I heard there's no alcohol there. I'm going to go to the nightclub or something. So, because what makes you happy, and what makes me happy. Each to his own. One man's meat is another man's poison, and so on. All these mentalities are there. That happiness, it's a totally relative thing, and it's different for everyone. No, it isn't. Only some persons, because they're in Rajagun, they think they'll be happy by going to the pub and getting drunk and getting into a fight on New Year's Eve. They think they'll be happy, but they're bewildered by Rajagun. And the result is, it starts off like nectar and ends like poison. And they're thinking, oh, the person who came to the Prana Festival to greet the New Year with an all-night kirtan and some vegetarian food and some yoga and meditation, there's what happiness is in that? That's like so prudish and whatever. So, but no, the happiness which is in Sattva Gun, it may begin like poison. It may start like poison. But as you follow the discipline, you observe it in your life, gradually it becomes easier and easier, and it turns into a current of joy, a current of nectar. So, now, we've tried to show how modern neurological discoveries support the science of yoga. This conclusion has very important ramifications on all levels. in education, in art, in politics even, in commerce. It means that, for example, in our society today, we try to become successful by earning money. And by money we can buy things that we don't need. To stimulate ourselves into a state of happiness. Right? So, it's all wrong. It's all completely wrong. It's totally unnatural and out of sync with the true understanding of the nature of the body, mind and soul. And so the theories of the Shastras of Yoga, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, show us a new path, a new model on which everything can be based, by which all people can gradually come to a higher standard of happiness and enlightenment. And it's not an opinion anymore, because now the neurology shows that the theories, the more you try to enjoy, the more you become miserable. That this theory is actually now a proven scientific fact. And that human beings are physiologically, biologically even, moral beings. Because now also, morality is considered to be something relative. Morality is relative. Whatever you do, you can do. It's all okay. But no, it's actually not a fact. Scientifically speaking, we see that all the activities which are being considered by all the great wisdom traditions and religions of the world to be immoral or sinful, actually are the activities which cause the gradual breakdown of the neural networks. That the receptors in the neural networks, they close down, and so what was previously called, say, a sinful activity or something, is actually destructive to the neural networks, and you can actually identify that scientifically now. So we are biologically meant to be moral beings. Because if you have some machine or something and you use it in a way that it causes its disintegration, or it impairs the ability of that machine to function, then that's a misuse. So similarly, the activities that the religions of the world have called forbidden or sinful or anything, actually impair the functioning of our neural networks and lead us into a state of slowly into a state of depression and unhappiness. So here, these discoveries of neurology, they are quite wonderful, because now they show that the conceptions of the spiritualists are actually not relative opinions, but they are hardwired facts. And those who understand this should be on a very vigorous campaign. We have to use our energy in the service of God and to benefit all the people of the world. We use our energy to uplift society by making these connections, and so that all the activities of life become based on a true understanding of the body, mind and the soul. So I want to move on to another point in regard to neurology, which is very interesting. All of us, at every moment, we're seeing and experiencing things through our senses. Now, the neurologists have identified which parts of the brain process different sensory experiences. And upon doing this, they found that, let's say for example, you have 5 senses. So there aren't 5 areas of the brain that deal with the 5 senses. It's not like that. If we just look at the sense of sight, one part of the brain deals with the different colors. Another part of the brain deals with motion. And another part of the brain deals with shapes. So, we have different parts of the brain dealing with different aspects of the picture that we see. But the picture that we see is one. We don't see 3 pictures. This one is only color, this is only shapes, and this is just what's moving. Right? It's all together in one picture, and we feel ourselves to be a unitary, coherent being. We don't feel as if we are 320 billion neurons firing. Right? You don't feel like that. You feel it's like one individual being having the experience of one picture made of color, shape and motion. So, the mechanisms for the identification of color, shape and motion are there in the brain. binds them together. There's nothing, they can't find anything in the brain that connects these to make them into one picture. And all the senses are like that, but there's no mechanism to connect the senses into one individual person who's having all the experiences at once, like this. So in neurology, this is called the binding problem. The binding problem. Because no one can find the parts that join all the bits together. So it's called the binding problem. So scientists have been struggling with this and will continue to struggle with it forever, because the binding doesn't take place on the neurological level. This is why. It doesn't take place there. It takes place on a deeper level, and that deeper level is actually Pran. Pran is the connection between the mind and the body. The consciousness of Atma, the soul, is reflected into the mind, and we identify with what the mind's doing, though it's not ourself. And then the desires in the mind are translated to the Pran, and the Pran then moves the physical body. How does it do that? I want to speak something about the constitution of Pran itself. What is Pran? You see, in the analysis of the elements that we began with, we have earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence, ego, and chitta. 5 gross elements, 4 subtle elements that compose the gross and subtle physical body that covers our soul, our spiritual identity. So, where's Pran? What is Pran? What is it made of? This is the question. Pran, now remember, Pran is a function of Kriya Shakti, Rajas. Raja. Without Rajas, there's no Kriya, there's no action in this world. So, the Buddhi, from the Buddhi, develops the Indriya, the senses. According to Vedanta, the senses are, as the soul is a minute atom of consciousness, the senses are also minute atoms of subtle energy, of Buddhi. The Buddhi transforms and becomes 5 atoms, and they're situated. In the Mundaka Upanishad it is said, Eisho nur atma chaitasa veditabhya yasmin prana panchada sandishesha prana chitam sarvam otam prajanam yasmin vishuddhe esha atma. It means it is your primary duty in life to know Atma, the soul, through Chaitasa, through pure consciousness. That Atma is floating in the heart chakra upon the Pran. And the Pran is essentially the element of air which has become infused by the Kriya Shakti. The Kriya Shakti present in the atom of the sense. So the soul is floating in the heart chakra, surrounded by 5 atoms of the senses, the power to hear, see, touch, taste, and smell. And they have Kriya Shakti. This Kriya Shakti is like electricity, if you like. And the Pran is like the copper wire. So the electricity flows in the copper wire. So air, the element of air is dead. Actually has no life, it has no consciousness, has no power to move by itself. But when the element, the gross element of air, is infused by the Kriya Shakti of the senses, then it travels out from the heart in 72,000 nadis. The Pran travels in the 72,000 nadis, or pranic channels throughout the entire body, and gives the impression to the soul, the Atma, which is very tiny, that I am this big lumbering, whatever, whoever you are, however big or small or fat or thin you are, we feel like we're this body. The soul is transcendental, the soul is spiritual. But because it's absorbed in the mind and senses, and the Kriya Shakti of the senses infuses the prana, the air, and sends it throughout all the nadis, gives us the impression that we are this body. So it's a bit like you know, if someone is being trained to drive to fly an aeroplane by a computer simulation, right? They're not really in an aeroplane, but they sit there and they put on the headphones and the goggles and everything, and then they feel like they're flying in the aeroplane. So it's like that, because they're connected to the software, they feel like they're flying an airplane. So in the same way, we are Atma, we're not doing anything. We are transcendental, and we are not doing anything. But the Pran connects the Atma to the physical body, and now we're in this virtual reality, if you like, thinking that we're doing so many things. So Krishna explained this in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Bewildered by ego, the living entity thinks that I am doing everything, when actually only the gunas are moving. The 3 gunas. Gunas are at play, and the jiva is a shakshi. The soul is a shakshi, that means a witness, only watching, but identifying with all the movements. I remember when I was a little boy, my parents took me to Disney World. So, no, this is actually a spiritual, it's a spiritual point, so I'm not going off the topic. So we went, there was this place, it was called something like Flight on a Magic Carpet. Okay, so you queue up for hours, as you do at all these places. So you queue up for hours, then you finally get in, and you walk in, and it's a cinema. But there are no chairs. There are no chairs in the cinema. But there are bars. There are like handrails going along. So everyone just walks in and they stand. They're just standing there. And what are these bars? What is it? Crowd control or something? What are these bars for? No one knows. So this cinema it's not like an ordinary cinema like this. It's 360 degrees. It's all the way around. So they got cameras and they filmed in every direction something, and they're projected there. And so it comes on. And you see the front of a carpet. You're sitting on a magic carpet. You see the front, you turn around, you can see the back. You can see the sides, like that. And then suddenly, the flying carpet takes off and goes into the sky. And then begins to fly over mountains and like this. So everyone's standing there. And so when the carpet goes over, everyone goes, "Whoa!" and they grab onto the bar. And they're all holding onto the bars like this. And when the flying carpet goes around the corner, everyone's and when it turns the other way, and they're all leaning over, and they're holding on to the bar to not fall over because of the, the centrifugal force of the carpet going so fast around the corner. Hello? Hello? The floor is not moving. Everyone's just in a room. It's completely still. But because the senses on all sides are seeing motion, everyone felt like they were moving, and they literally had to hold on to the rail to stop themselves from falling over. How powerful is the illusion of sensory experience? Very, very powerful. So those who have no sadhana, spiritual practice, they are on this ride, holding onto the bars all the time. Whoa! Those who do sadhana and purify their consciousness, they become Shakshi. I am the witness, and these things are external, moving, but I am still and transcendental. So they feel the joy of the soul and unaffected by the external motions, temporary movements of the wind of the world, the fluctuations of the gunas. So, we're discussing about how all the parts of the brain are not connected. It seems like there's no connection. But what happens is, the subtle platform of the nervous system of the body is actually the pran. The pran is moving in the nadis. That is the subtle body, and that is the foundation of the gross nervous system that you see. So in the nervous system you see electrical activity, So electrical activity technically, according to the Vedas, is fire, the element of fire. So you have earth, water, fire, air, and this is the pran. So each element touches the next one, you see. So what happens is the mind moves the pran by its will. That's described in Vedanta Sutra as being like a magnet. As a magnet can move iron filings, so similarly, the mind by its will draws the pran towards itself. The soul, in fact, draws the mind and the pran and the senses towards itself by will. But then, the pran, which is fire, touches the air element. The pran, which is air, infused by the Kriya Shakti, touches the fire element, and that causes the movements of electricity in the nervous system. So that movement of electricity in the nervous system is the most subtle thing that any scientist today can detect. They can't go further than that. They examine, and the finest thing that they can find is minute electrical activity. But what's causing that, the fluctuations in the electrical activity, they cannot detect it. These are very minute fluctuations. Some persons have posited that there cannot be such a thing as a non-physical soul or non-physical mind interacting with matter. Because if something non-physical interacted with matter, then it would break the laws of physics. Right? So just as the scientists have this binding problem that they can't solve, so the scientists, they throw in the lap of the spiritualists, well, no, we can't accept that your non-physical soul and mind can interact with the physical body, because then, if there's interaction outside of the physical system, it will break the laws of physics. So that's called the problem of interventionism. So two problems. The materialists have the binding problem, and the spiritualists have the problem of interventionism. But the problem of interventionism actually really isn't a problem. And the reason is that the pran makes very minute micro adjustments to the electricity in the body, which are immeasurable. But micro adjustments by a chain reaction of cause and effect become macro effects. You know, perhaps you've heard of the butterfly effect. Yeah? Everyone knows the butterfly effect? So the butterfly effect is used in science to communicate, to illustrate the chaos theory. That there's a butterfly in the Bahamas, and the butterfly flaps his wing, which moves the air slightly, and that moves some other air, and 4 years later there's a tornado in Kansas. Now, if that butterfly had not flapped his wing at that moment, on that day, in that place, that tornado in Kansas 4 years later would not have taken place. This is science. Scientists accept this. They accept this because when you have complex systems with many variables, a very slight micro adjustment in one place causes massive macro adjustments later down the chain of reaction. So in the same way, the pran makes very fine, immeasurable micro adjustments in the electricity of the body. And in this way, the soul, which is transcendental, and the mind, which is not gross matter that can be perceived by the ordinary persons, they actually acts on the physical body, makes macro effects, and in this way, the soul, being transcendental, is the driver of this vehicle of the body, while at the same time, no scientist can even detect the presence of the soul. It's basically a foolproof illusion. The illusion is foolproof. Because it was designed by God, who is smarter than everyone. Okay, so now coming back to our verse of the Mundaka Upanishad. Here in the Mundaka Upanishad it said, the Atma, the soul. The Atma, the soul, is a particle of spirit floating on the pran in the heart chakra. And when the consciousness is purified from contact with the pran, then what happens? Vibhavati Eish Atma. The glory of the soul manifests. The soul has astonishing glories. Let me You are astonishingly glorious. You are all astonishingly glorious. The soul is beautiful. The soul is artistic. The soul is adventurous, romantic, and skilled in all arts. The soul has its own spiritual form and personality, and all astonishing qualities. But that vibhavati eish atma, the astonishing qualities of the soul will not manifest until the pran becomes vishuddha. Vishuddha. This is a very interesting word. Yasmin vishuddhe vibhavati eish atma. Vishuddha means completely pure. Not just sattvic. Sattva is pure, shuddha, but not vishuddha. By following the karma yoga, the activities of karma yoga, you gradually become free from karmas and rise up from the lower gunas, from tamagun, rajagun to sattvagun. By ashtanga yoga, you can come to sattva and become shuddha, pure, by different types of yoga. But Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, is nirgun. It is vishuddha, completely pure, even untouched by sattva. In Shvetashvata Upanishad, it is said, Dva suparna sahuja vihaya samana viksham parishashvajate. There are two birds sitting in a tree. Two birds are sitting in a tree. One bird is eating the fruit, which is sometimes sweet and sometimes rotten and bitter. And the other bird, his friend, is watching, just watching. The bird who is eating the fruit sometimes feels some happiness and sometimes he's suffering. But if he will turn around and see the other bird next to him, he will discover endless joy. This is the verse of Shvetashvata Upanishad. What does it mean? The tree is this body. This body is like a tree. And there's a branch on this tree. That is the heart chakra. And there on the branch of this tree, two birds are sitting. Not one. There's not one atma in every body. There are two atmas. One bird, that means one atma, is you. And that atma is trying to taste the fruits of the tree. In other words, what can I experience through this body? What can I touch, taste, smell, and enjoy and experience? But there's another bird there, and that is called Paramatma. Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, the friend of everyone. The unlimitedly merciful and loving Supreme Personality, Paramatma, Bhagavan, is there with you at all times, in every lifetime, patiently tapping his foot and waiting. When will she become bored of this? Here we go again, birth, school, college, job, like this, old age, death, and birth again, like this. Soul is going through many lifetimes, and Paramatma is there waiting. But when the Atma turns attention to the Paramatma within, then at that time, he discovers the unlimited nectar, unlimited bliss. You see, until the soul falls in love, Atma falls in love with Paramatma, we cannot understand who we are. Because that's who we are. The Atma is the lover of Paramatma. It's just like iron. Iron doesn't know who I am. If there's some plastic, some wood, some glass, some paper, some iron, well, they're just all things. What's special about the iron? If a magnet will come and touch the wood, nothing happens. Touch the paper, comes anywhere near the iron and the iron jumps. Then the iron discovers, what is it about me that is special? Who am I? What is my true nature? So in the same way, by any type of spiritual practice or path or purification or sadhana, you can try to push away the entanglement with the external world. But only when Atma turns in devotion towards Paramatma does one's true qualities come out. Yasmin Vishuddhe Vibhavati Esha Atma. When the soul becomes Vishuddha, fixed on the Vishuddha Swarup, the transcendental form of the Paramatma, then